Hi and welcome to Dynamics Update. Today is one of those not as late nights as we usually record on, but with me here as usual is of course Gustav Sundblad. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
And then we also have a guest, and sometimes we get some of those like legendary people, those who everyone knows who they are. And in this case, we have a guest called Martin. Hi, Martin. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hello from Prague. So, yeah, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, well, you said that everyone knows me. Well, I think I should introduce myself. Yeah, so I'm Martin Dráb from Czech Republic, and I work with Dynamics and especially like Axapta, Dynamics AX, now FNO for, I don't know, long time, 20 years or something. Yeah, and I'm focused on development, on technical issues, software architecture, and lifecycle management, these kind of things. Yeah, but yeah, obviously people know me more from what I do in community forums and sometimes some blogs and these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, when I mentioned to colleagues that we were going to interview Martin, I was like, "Oh, he's a hero. He's saved me so many times from history in the community." I think, yeah, both me and Johan and you, Martin, we were in Dynamics Minds conference last year in Portros, and you had a session together with Andre, our mutual friend, related to. I think I don't remember the stats now. I think I logged on to community just before this. And you have 25,000, or you had, I'm gonna say like 2 hours ago, you had 25,761 comments, and that's really, really impressive stats. I think it's really cool. You have a number of badges as well. So that's basically my first question. And this, how do you find the time, or is it something that you do? Like, describe your like a day in the life of Martin when you look at forums. I suppose you have notifications or RSS feeds to, or do you just like monitor the incoming questions?
Yeah, well, so regarding time, the good thing with forums is that you don't need too much time for it. So, yeah, when I have some time, even during my work, I check what's going on, and sometimes something I do in evenings. So, yeah, well, like for writing like deep dive blog, you need much more time, and that's what I'm struggling with these days. Especially also because I'm busy at my work, and I have also a bit of private life.
Hopefully.
So yeah, I am not very good in doing these deep dive things. But for forums, you just need a few minutes of time, so
Yeah.
it's not a big deal. Yeah, and how I do it depends what the platform allows me to do. So now with community dynamics come recently, they upgraded to or completely changed the platform. It's not really an upgrade; it's
It's just
completely different thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we didn't have any notifications there. Now we have emails, still not perfect, but at least something. Big problem there is that things are split to many forums. So I have X forum and finance forum and supply chain forum. People put FNO questions to X forum or to general forum, and it's still a bit a mess. But there are some plans to solve this problem as well. So they sometimes makes it more difficult for me, but it's life.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to work with the tools you have, right? That's never been more true than what we do today. But you've been working with Axapta. I wonder. I used to think. I noticed in one of the earlier versions of AX, when it was AX7, I noticed there were still references to Axapta in the code. I haven't seen if it's been removed. If you still see the actual Axapta term in the FNO code, but I think nowadays anyone who hasn't worked with old AX, still it's like Axapta, AX, FNO, but the references in the metadata and in the code are still there.
I don't remember seeing Axapta, but AX7 or even Rainier, which was code name when AX7 was being developed, that's something I sometimes see it somewhere.
Yeah.
I think they are removing like the oldest generations, all of the references for the oldest generation. So when they went to AX, they removed something earlier, and when they went to FNO, they removed Axapta and kept AX, and for the next version, they will remove AX.
And now it's just confusing. Is it finance, or is it supply chain, or is it commerce? Which one is it? But it's the same application. It's all the same.
Yeah, it's a mess. I really dislike this. Yeah, we don't really know how to call the thing, and even Microsoft, and you see that sometimes, we don't have finance and operations anymore, but documentation is for finance and operation, or sometimes unified operations and whatever. It's confusing, and really confusing. No one understands, and then users tend to talk about, I'm using Dynamics. And they have no idea that, if you tell me Dynamics, I have no idea what you are talking about. Do you mean, Business Central or something? For every user, their product is Dynamics. And
No, exactly. I've been in recruitment, and I mean that's also a mess when you have Dynamics and you get a lot of people like discussing which part of Dynamics, because it's a whole different story. And of course we're hopefully, or I mean somewhere in the future, it will be one platform. It's more unified, which for us technical people, it's just really, really hard to wrap your head around how it will work, like with applications being so different as they are, at least from the start. I think that's a big challenge now. Coming from Axapta and AX, I had this question when I read up before this interview. If the manner of questions on the forum has changed as well. I would imagine that if you had a problem with AX4, let's say, it was often a very clear problem. Like you only had AIF. You couldn't really solve integration in a better way than AIF. So you had a problem with that, and then that could be very easily solved. Now, or sometimes not so easy, but at least it was a very clearly identified problem, right? Now you have so many. The problem can be how to solve the problem can be a problem in itself, because you have so many options available to you now to solve any given like technical problem, based on Power Platform, based on like doing logic apps. You can do a number of things using the entities that weren't there before. So have you seen, like, you who read so many questions, have you seen a shift, like going from the more how do I write this code to okay, how should I tackle this issue? Is that something that you see?
Yeah, well, there are definitely more components than before. But I would argue that you forgot a business connector, and we used to have
sure,
like web services using business connector in the backend. But yeah, anyway, so now you have FNO, but you have lots of integrations. You have I don't know what you have I don't know, business events putting messages to service bus, and you have like Dataverse with virtual entities and do override and whatever. And when you go like in the area of integration, that's just it's not like that, not just that the product changed, but we didn't have like Azure and all the features and all the options, and Azure itself is changing rapidly. So if you don't follow it very closely, then you are a bit lost. Or it happened to me before. You go to Azure, you used something 2 years ago, but it was actually deprecated a year ago, and there are two new options to use. So sometimes I feel like by myself that following all changes, like in those few services in Azure that I use in Azure DevOps, in FNO, it's difficult. You just can't do everything.
I was just going to say that even though we use everything we need from Azure, we are just using a tiny part of Azure anyway, because there are a lot of other things that we will never be affected by. So even if we use everything that we need, it's still a small part of it, and even there, in that small part, there are lots of changes all the time. So
Yeah, Azure is full of stuff, and half of it I wouldn't understand what it is about.
No, and especially maybe not how to use it in the best way. I think that's the challenging part for me. I'm trying to stay on top of like the business applications in themselves. I'm trying to understand how all of these components fit together. Specifically, I mean, I can argue that I know F&O pretty well. I mean, from a functional aspect and a technical aspect, but now it's hard because you also need to understand how the business applications fit together. And if you add Azure components on top of that, it's a lot to stay up to date with, of course.
It's not just about like how to write Azure function calling to F&O, but then you need to start thinking about security, reliability, what will it cost you, and you have decisions to make that influence all these things. And like just to be able to design proper security strategy for your Azure solution is pretty hard. And
yeah, absolutely.
From my point of view, no one can really expect that you know everything in F&O and you also know all these things in Azure. So there needs to be people specialized in certain things, because like I feel like quite confident that I can do some stuff. I can implement. I write Azure functions in C# and these kind of things. But I wouldn't go and tell a client, okay, I'm the guy who will set up your Azure with all the security features, etc. And so you are protected against DDoS attacks, and so it's just completely different beast.
Absolutely, and that's needed to be, as you say, it's a different kind of specialization. But just selecting the correct tool for the problem at hand can sometimes be challenging as well, because there are many ways to solve any given issue right now. So that's where the community helps a lot, of course, and I think also there's so much ongoing conversations now at any given time, and the Viva Engage threads. I was going to say Yammer, but I corrected myself quickly. Viva Engage threads and community, and not to mention the product documentation itself as well, that has also, I think, become much better, at least since over the years. So it's a lot of information to digest. It's not just writing a few lines of code and then deploying and then you're done. You need to really understand the implications of it in a much more complicated area.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a developer, so I don't write any kind of code, so I don't have a preference for where to develop things. But I sort of think that it's a good thing that we have broken out a lot of things from the old AX platform and building it in Azure, or in as you said, in Azure Functions or in Logic Apps or whatever, because that makes the ERP system more specialized, more focused on what it's good at doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the complicated parts with AX sometimes was that people built something into AX that should never have been there. I mean, there's a lot of horrible stories there, I think. But it also, as you say, it's a lot of using the right tool for the right choice. We had another session at the same conference, Martin, related to development in AX or in F&O. Sorry, as you said, the names, finance and operations, F&O, AX. I still say AX, so it's
sure.
But you get what I mean. But you had a lot of good demo of tools that you use for because you are in at the core developer, right? That's a description. You're a software developer at the core, but you're a technical architect. Is that correct? So you still develop.
I work as a freelancer, and every project is different. So sometimes I focus more on like architecture. Sometimes I do more coding by myself. It depends.
But what is your experience with the new experience, so to speak? Have you tried out the new non-LCS based machines?
Well, honestly, not really. I'm following what's going on there. Didn't really have opportunity to play with it. Uh, to me, my ideal would be that I can do everything offline, so I can just go to plane and start coding and testing, etc. But what's going on now, it makes sense to me. So basically, we wouldn't, because FNO is complex, and especially then we have this more and more integration with Dataverse, etc. It's more and more complex with more and more dependencies on stuff in Azure, and even having SQL Server and all the web servers with certificates, etc. Locally, it's a lot of work. Lots of things to install, manage, etc. So if we don't need to deal with all these things, or not so many, and it's easier for us, we don't need those VMs or real powerful machines to host all these things. And for Microsoft, it's probably easier than to evolve. They don't wait for everyone to upgrade their development VMs to something or so. So I think it's direction that makes sense. And what I hear from people, well, everyone is fine with it. The only question which is being discussed again and again is the question of cost of the storage.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, one of the things that is the upside of these as well is that more and more of what you build in FNO is dependent on Power Platform and the full connection to Power Platform and so on. So having the Power Platform hosted environments makes sense, because then every environment, even a development environment has a connection to Power Platform. So if you want to expose Power Platform data in FNO or vice versa, then it's much easier to verify and test, because before you had to build it and hope it worked, and then deploy it to something where you could test it, and then if it didn't work, you needed to start all over again. So
what I love, like when I am developing Azure functions, is that you have local emulator, so you can run and debug it locally. But obviously, that's in matter of complexity, it's something completely different.
Usually, just one operation that you need to perform with those. That's the complicated part. I think absolutely with FNO, you could be a very, very proficient coder, but if you don't understand the business logic, then it might turn out wrong anyway. So that's the complex part of doing ERP, I would say. There was this nice someone, I don't remember who it was, that had that nice coffee mug. We discussed it before, Johan. Like, I work with ERP, super complicated and tricky stuff. It was a very good description of working with ERP. I wanted to have one of those, but they didn't dare to print my own. I think it was like a copyright issue. I'm not sure. But it is, I mean, and it was complicated before as well, just understanding the business logic. But now with dual write can be a mess to like troubleshoot if something goes wrong, and just you change one little component on your FNO side or metadata, you have a whole range of problems that can just like disperse out through your connected environments. So it's really ALM and severe contingencies are super important, and testing is also a very critical like problem now, because everything you can test and write good unit tests for your code, but doing it chained across business applications, I think that will be very tricky.
More components that's always more complicated. I remember, how I felt with like enterprise portal or so, like these interfaces between systems, always some, point of problems that were very difficult to diagnose. And it's also it also means that there should be tools to help with this, ideally. So you can like use some test stubs for tests where you don't really need a real communication. You can simulate communication for for some test scenarios, or have really good telemetry, so you can diagnose those issues, not just okay, it doesn't work, let's try something, but we don't really know.
That's the first step in troubleshooting. Okay, let's just try to run it again, see if it still happens. Always the first step.
Yeah. And by the way, I use a lot event logs for FNO, and there is surprisingly a lot of information in most cases, not always, of course, but very often you can find like something just failed. You go to event logs and it tells you, well, it's because this and this and this. Yeah, this is how.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love it with everything.
Yeah, but when you say event logs, you mean the event logs on the machine, or else and in LCS for cloud for telemetry, right?
Oh yeah, I'm talking about dev environments.
Okay.
For like higher tiers, you have it in LCS.
Yeah.
But obviously, then when you have distributed systems, you would like to correlate events in different systems.
Yeah.
And I hope that we will slowly get into having more and more information from different systems in application insights or something.
Yeah, exactly.
There are like pieces that should be expanded and put together, and that's the way how this problem can be solved. That may give you much more information. So you can have one place where you will get all this telemetry from different systems, and you will be able to see where it failed and what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have to be able to understand the logs, but just getting that data into application insights from any higher tier environments. Now we have the LCS tool, but we need some way to funnel, like you say, from all connected applications as well, not only from FNO. That will really give us a way to figure out what is wrong. But also on the other aspect, as we had a previous interview discussing how to also gain insights into actual usage of the system. So I think that telemetry that you mentioned, Martin, coming to application insights and being able to correlate between different applications not only is important from a troubleshooting perspective, it's also important from like a ALM usage perspective. How do we actually use the system? What should we focus on fixing? So it's a very important topic.
Yeah, well, before when I was, like when Windows 8 was new or there was new version of Visual Studio, Microsoft always came with information like, we know that no one clicks the 5th item anymore, so we just show 3. And, this kind of information, like which feature is used more and which isn't. Yeah. We sometimes just guess what our users are doing, or, we listen to those loudest ones. So that would be really interesting. And
absolutely. I think so too. I think the 365 Office team, 365, I listened to a presentation once that, well, when you started using like let's say Excel and in 365, you would notice that the buttons are like moving around because of telemetry. So for each release, they're doing just as you explained. They see that this button is not being used as much, so they move it slightly to the right. And next release, they move it even more to the right. And the next release, they just hide it completely. We don't really have that option more than, as you say, we listen to users. And now with the views functionality, we just see the horrible mass usage of views being spread around. So you don't have a streamlined experience. But that would be very, very helpful for all of us. Absolutely. Do you have any favorite? Martin had a question related to when we discussed the DevOps in your presentation. You showed us a lot of good tools to use. Specifically, I think it was Git. Do you have a favorite repository versus VSTS or Git, or which one are you using the most now?
Well, for FNO, I use only VSTS or TFVC now, Information Version Control. I use Git for some smaller stuff, for tools and for projects on GitHub. I think that we will probably slowly get all more to Git because there doesn't seem to be much investment, or I think it was even announced that there won't be any investment to the information version control. Everything seems to be moving to Git.
Yeah.
And for version control, I don't have big problems with TAVC. But yeah, I see I would love tools that we have in Git, for example, for code reviews. It would help me a lot. But yeah, ultimately, I would rather use Git, even that I don't really know it that well. I use it, know it as a user, not like a real super user.
Same here.
But yeah, this is direction that I think will happen and will make sense. But it's more about how you use it than what tool you have. And for Git, it may be even disadvantage, because if you don't really know well what you are doing, then you can do a lot of harm. Or at least sometimes it means that you need someone who can configure it, not to allow you things where you can destroy too much stuff, set up some processes, so you just from all the options you have, you do it in some consistent way.
Yeah. I mean, we are using it in most of the projects that I'm in at the moment. We're using it, and I especially think it's good if we have multiple sources from where we get code. If we have multiple delivery streams in the code branches, that's working with the feature branches and pull requests and so on is a bit simpler. You don't need that much central control over the branches.
Yeah, well, Team Foundation version control have branches as well, but it's basically a completely different thing than
Yep. But that's why I'm saying that it's much easier if you have different. Say that you have different developers from different partners that deliver different part of the system. Then it's a bit easier to control what gets into the main branch and so on. So it's a bit easier.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you use the tool that you are most proficient with, but then in the end, as you say, if they're not investing as much into, I mean, there's not like there are coming 20 new features every month in how Git is working, right? It's a tool, part of the platform that we use to deploy, and it's hopefully not changing too much. So use the one that you are proficient with, and the one you feel comfortable with, and the one that fits your needs as well.
And sometimes I see teams that are a bit pushed to Git because there is other development in the company that uses Git. So people logically want to use the same thing for everything. And then, I feel that some teams end with Git without really understanding it, because it's just there are people in the company who decided.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, the learning curve is quite steep there, I would say. So one just need to invest time to learning it and start with simple things. Otherwise I wouldn't be too afraid of it. What I would love if I was on a project on Git, that I would, if there was someone really experienced, someone who can give guidance and solve some troubles that sooner or later you will get into trouble.
Yeah, and I mean, if the organization is already using it in other parts, then that might be actually a good thing. And I mean, having one system to manage code. I mean, I often get into the questions when it comes to the project management parts of DevOps. We have organizations that use Jira and that use other kinds of options for managing work items. And I'm like, I understand that it doesn't make sense to have multiple ones, but on the other hand, if you're a sufficiently large organizations, you will still have different parts of the company that work with different systems, especially if you haven't decided on a system from day one. Then there will be people, and it's the problem is that it's sort of almost a religious stance what solution you use, because the people working with GitHub and Jira, they swear by GitHub and Jira, and the people that is in the Microsoft camp, they use DevOps and like that. So it's a bit hard to merge them into one, especially since we still don't have like all of the tools available on the other platforms. So I mean, we could theoretically put the code in GitHub, but we would still have to use DevOps for pipelines and building things and so on. So it's not that easy.
And I mentioned that sometimes people have tendency to use just one tool, but it's not necessary. And I am currently working on a project where we have one team project. FNO code is in TAVC repo, and integration code is in Git repo, and it's not a problem. So obviously there are separate teams. Each team uses its own repo, but it doesn't matter. It can be done this way.
I mean, I would say the big benefit isn't really which repo you're using. The big benefit is that you're using the same platform for work items and things, because then you can cooperate between the teams as well. So
and
I have the worst.
If I can choose, I prefer using Azure DevOps, because all the integration with I mean, in comparison with Jira, for example, because I can link code to work items and work items to builds and builds to releases and all this integration and trackability. That's really nice. But yeah, of course, it's about how you set up your processes. So you don't necessarily need to have this particular tool, but it makes certain things much easier.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can work with placeholders as well. We have teams working with Jira, teams working with Azure DevOps. I mean, you could get them working, as you say, if there are separate teams, just link whatever you need to track together with your corresponding work items. That's sufficient to make things work, not to overcomplicate it.
And I mean, by putting it in perspective, it wasn't that long ago when we didn't have anything. We didn't have any repositories. We didn't have any DevOps. We didn't have anything. So, I mean, it's still, we have come a long way, even though we are a bit behind most of the other people. But we have come quite a bit, I would say.
I was using the information server in AX 2009, I think. But
okay.
I saw a customer running Axapta 3 on custom integration with CVS, or how it used to be called.
Yeah. But there wasn't that many customers who were using like a source control system.
No, the built-in source control was the most heavily used one within AX, I think. But I saw a couple of TFS installations as well.
And I saw, sometimes it was really difficult to explain partners. It's a good idea to use source control. And so now it's much easier, and so people just accepted it. But it's true that in previous versions it was just difficult. So now with FNO, it's trivial. So people started using it. So it was also fault of Microsoft that it was just really difficult to do. And then companies hired me to set up automated builds for them. Now they can do it on their own.
Yeah. Any final things you want to add, Martin? I think we're rounding up on our usual time. So do you have anything you want to mention? Anything you're working on right now that you want to highlight?
Not sure. Maybe one thing. I will go to Dynamics Minds again, and this time
Yeah.
I want to talk about NuGet packages. Because that's something I started using on my project now, because we have like huge amount of ISV solutions and these kind of things. And the main motivation for us was because we are using gated builds, and they get slower and slower and slower because we were building all those ISV solutions, etc. So I changed the design to build them just once, create NuGet package, and for pipelines we just download packages from artifacts feeds. So that may be interesting for other people as well.
Very cool. Thank you. That's we're looking forward to that presentation and using NuGet, and then we're coming even closer to your dream, Johan. That the FNO they are fully compliant with with all the other developers out there.
That's good. That's what I like. Yes. So thanks a lot for joining us today, Martin. It was a really an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.